I signed the divorce papers with a steady hand, though. Inside, I felt like I was crumbling 7 years of marriage to Brian down the drain, 7 years of trying to be someone. I wasn't of pretending his controlling behavior was just protective congratulations. Mrs. Garcia, or should I say Miss Garcia now, the lawyer smiled thinly, gathering the papers with practiced efficiency. Just, it was fine, I mumbled, already heading for the door. The late autumn air hit my face as I stepped outside the law office, and I took my first deep breath as a divorced woman, 35 years old, and starting over damn. My phone buzzed with a reminder of the Brooklyn bakery battle started in an hour I'd completely forgotten after spending the morning dissolving my marriage. The last thing I wanted was to present my grandmother's chocolate cake recipe to a panel of judges, but I promised my friend Skylar I wouldn't bail. Besides, the prize money could help with the deposit on a new apartment in the community center kitchen. I threw myself into the familiar comfort of baking, the methodical measuring, the precise timing. It was like dog training. My actual profession both required patience and understanding of temperament. 30 minutes remaining bakers, the announcer called. And I cursed under my breath. I'd been lost in thought, replaying the morning's events in my mind. The cake was cooling when I reached for my secret ingredient, a splash of bourbon that had always been Grandma's finishing touch. As I turned with the bottle in hand, something solid collided with my hip. Oh, a female voice gasped as I stumbled, nearly dropping the bourbon. I regained my balance to find myself face to face with a stunning woman with auburn hair, cascading over her shoulders, those remarkable blue eyes seeming to look past me rather than at me. At her side stood a golden retriever in a guide harness, alert and professional. "I'm so sorry," I said, realizing she was blind. I wasn't watching where. "Technically, that's my line," she interrupted with a re-smile that made something flutter in my chest. "I'm Hannah, and this troublemaker is Rusty. He's supposed to prevent collisions, not cause them." I laughed despite myself. "I'm Layla. Are you competing?" Judging, actually, her fingers lightly brushed my arm, sending an unexpected shiver through me. "Local pastry chef with a particularly discerning palate. Or so they tell me. My stomach dropped a judge. I just body checked one of the judges. "Well, you'll find my disaster of a chocolate bourbon cake in Station 4, I said, attempting humor to mask my panic, looking forward to it. Hannah's smile widened, revealing perfect teeth, though. "I should warn you, I'm brutally honest," as she moved away, guided by Rusty's careful navigation. I couldn't help but watch her. There was something magnetic about her confidence, the way she moved through the world without seeing it. The judging began. 30 minutes later, I stood nervously by my station as Hannah approached. When she took a bite of my cake, her expression changed immediately. "This is," she began, then took another bite, eyes closing. "This reminds me of something my grandmother made. The bourbon is subtle but transformative." I couldn't explain the pride that surged through me at her words. When the winners were announced and my name was called for first place, I felt a genuine smile break through for the first time that day. The moment was shattered by a familiar voice behind me. "Always the domestic goddess, aren't you, Isla?" Brian, his timing had always been impeccable in the worst possible way. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, accepting my ribbon while trying to maintain composure. "We need to discuss the house. You're being unreasonable about the valuation." People were staring. Now my ex-husband, 6 feet of designer suit and entitlement towering over me in a community center kitchen. "This isn't the time or place," I said through clenched teeth. "It never is with you, is it?" He grabbed my arm, not hard enough to hurt, but enough to assert control, his favorite move. Before I could respond, a guide dog was suddenly between us, and Hannah appeared at my side. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cool and commanding. "Is there a problem here?" Brian looked confused by the interruption from a blind woman. "This doesn't concern you, the winner of my competition category being harassed? Absolutely concerns me," Hannah replied. Evenly, Brian released my arm, embarrassment flickering across his face as he realized people were watching. "We'll discuss this later," he muttered before stalking off as the crowd dispersed. Hannah turned to me, ex-husband, as of approximately 4 hours ago, I confirmed, suddenly exhausted. Well then. She held out her hand, finding mine with surprising accuracy. Sounds like you could use a friend, and I could use someone to help me with Rusty's recent behavioral issues. I hear you're a dog trainer. Our hands stayed connected a moment longer than necessary, and that strange flutter returned to my chest in the chaos of ending one chapter of my life. I hadn't expected to feel the slightest excitement about beginning another, yet here it was an unexpected connection on what should have been the worst day of my life. Hannah Allen was nothing like I expected when she called the next day about training her guide dog. I pictured us meeting in some sterile office setting. Instead, she suggested Central Park, where Rusty could work through his recent distractions. He's been with me for 3 years, Hannah explained as we walked along a tree-lined path, fallen leaves crunching beneath our feet. Her voice carried on the crisp November air, but lately he's been ignoring commands. Yesterday, he nearly walked me into a street sign. I observed Rusty carefully. Guide dogs are still dogs sometimes. They develop bad habits like ex-husbands. Hannah smirked, and I laughed despite myself, exactly like ex-husbands, only cuter and more trainable. I watched how she moved with such grace, auburn hair catching the afternoon light, those blue eyes, though unseeing, seemed to sparkle with intelligence. I caught myself staring and felt oddly flustered, so Hannah said after I'd assessed Rusty's behavior, "You judge bakery competitions often?" God, no, that was my first time entering my ex-husband thought. Baking was beneath me, the words tumbled out before I could stop them. Beneath you baking is practically alchemy. Brian wanted a corporate wife, not someone who trains dogs and bakes bourbon cakes. I guided her around a puddle, my hand briefly touching her elbow. Sorry, I didn't mean to dump my baggage on you. I'm blind, Isla, not deaf. I can hear the hurt in your voice. We continued walking, and I found myself telling Hannah more than I told anyone about my failed marriage, how Brian's subtle criticisms had eroded my confidence, how his world of business dinners and country clubs had never felt like mine enough about my disaster. I finally said, "What's your story?" Nothing dramatic. Born with retinal degeneration, lost my sight completely by 18, became a food critic because my other senses compensated. Now I judge pastry competitions and write reviews that make chefs cry. That's why you could taste the bourbon so distinctly, among other things. She smiled. Your cake reminded me of home. Most contestants try too hard to impress with complexity. Yours was honest. Something about the way she said it made me pause. We'd reached a bench overlooking the pond, and I suggested we sit. May I? Hannah asked, reaching toward my face. I hesitated only a moment before saying yes. Her fingers traced my features delicately, forehead, cheekbones. The line of my jaw I held perfectly still, breath caught in my throat. I like to know who I'm talking to, she explained softly. You have kind eyes, I can feel it in the laugh lines. The intimacy of the moment startled me. No one had ever paid such careful attention to simply knowing me. Our training session ended too quickly. As we parted ways, Hannah handed me her card. I'd like to continue Rusty's training and maybe get your recipe 2 days later. I found myself at Hannah's brownstone apartment. She opened the door before I could knock. Your perfume gives you away, she explained, vanilla with something citrusy. The training session went well until midway through, when Rusty became completely fixated on something outside. Hannah demonstrated the command to redirect him, but he wouldn't budge. Here, I said, moving behind her like this. I placed my hands over hers, guiding her through the correct motion with the harness, her back pressed against my front, and I became intensely aware of our proximity. Her hair smelled like lavender. Like this? She asked, repeating the movement. Perfect, I managed to say, stepping back quickly. My heart was racing, and I couldn't understand why. After the session, Hannah insisted I stay for coffee. We ended up talking for hours. She told me about her cousin, Skylar, who'd helped her navigate life after losing her sight. I shared stories about my most challenging canine clients. I Had this one poodle who would only respond to commands in French. I was saying when my phone buzzed, "Brian again, everything okay?" Hannah asked, noting my sudden silence. "Just my ex, he's contesting the business valuation now claims. My dog training practice is worth more than I reported. Sounds like he's not. Handling the divorce, well, he never could stand losing when it was time to leave. Hannah walked me to the door. In the narrow hallway, we stood closer than necessary. Same time next week?" She asked, definitely. There was a moment, a heartbeat of hesitation where I thought she might lean in, where I might have let her instead. Rusty nudged between us, breaking the spell on the subway ride home. I couldn't stop thinking about that almost moment, about how for the first time since signing those divorce papers, I'd gone hours without feeling like a failure, about how Hannah's fingertips had felt tracing my face, about the strange and terrifying possibility that what I was feeling might be attraction. I'd never been attracted to a woman before. The realization didn't send me into the panic I might have expected instead. I found myself smiling at my reflection in the subway window, wondering what Hannah had really seen when she touched my face and hoping she might want to do it. Again, the apartment keys felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked the door to my new place. It was tiny compared to the sprawling brownstone. I'd shared with Brian just the one bedroom with barely enough space for my belongings, but it was mine no more. Walking on eggshells, no more passive-aggressive comments about my career choice. "Welcome home, girl," I whispered to Pepper, my border collie mix, who promptly explored every corner of our new domain. I'd rescued her after a client couldn't handle her energy level. We were both starting over. I unpacked the essentials first, dog supplies, clothes, my grandmother's recipe box. I hung up my business certification with a sense of pride. Lila Garcia, professional dog trainer. It might not impress Brian's country club friends, but it was who I really was. My phone chimed with a text. "Hannah House. The new place Rusty misses you." I found myself smiling as I typed back, still surrounded by boxes. "Tell Rusty his girlfriend Pepper says hi." Another chime. Just "Rusty misses you." That flutter in my chest returned 3 weeks of training sessions with Hannah had evolved into something that felt dangerously like flirting. I still wasn't sure what to make of it, or of my response to it the next morning. I threw myself into building my business. New neighborhood meant new potential clients, so I distributed flyers at the local pet shops and vet offices by afternoon. I booked 2 new consultations and scheduled a follow-up with Hannah. "The issue isn't Rusty," I explained during our session in Central Park. Guide dogs are trained to make decisions that sometimes override commands if they perceive danger. Hannah frowned, but ignoring me to chase. "Squirrels isn't protecting me now, but he's picking up on something I watched." "Rusty, carefully, your anxiety. Maybe dogs are incredibly intuitive. I'm not anxious." She protested, then sighed. "Okay, maybe a little. My publisher wants another book proposal, and I'm blocked. You're a writer, food critic." I published a memoir about navigating New York's restaurant scene without sight. She smiled wryly. It was more successful than I anticipated. I guided Hannah's hands to demonstrate a correction technique, intensely aware of how close we stood. "Consistency is key." I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dogs respond to confidence. Is that what you respond to?" Hannah asked softly before I could answer. Rusty suddenly lunged at a passing bicycle, pulling Hannah forward. I caught her automatically, my arms wrapping around her waist. For a breathless moment, we stood pressed against each other, her back to my front. "Sorry," she murmured, but didn't move away. "Don't be," I whispered, still holding her. She turned in my arms, her face tilted up toward mine. "Lila." I didn't think. I just leaned in and kissed her. Her lips were soft, hesitant at first, then responding with a warmth that made my knees weak. When we broke apart, I was trembling. I've never kissed a woman before. I confessed. Hannah's smile was radiant. "Then I'm honored to be here first." The moment was shattered by my phone ringing. Brian's ringtone. I ignored it, but the spell was broken. "I should go," I said reluctantly. "Client consultation in an hour." Hannah nodded her fingers, touching her lips, as if preserving the memory. Call me later. I did call that night. We talked until 2 o'clock in the morning about everything and nothing. Her book. Ideas, my business dreams, our shared love of vintage records. It felt easy in a way things with Brian never had come over tomorrow. She asked before we hung up, I want to cook for you, nothing fancy, just pasta. The next evening found me at Hannah's door with wine and flowers, feeling like a teenager on a first date. She opened the door wearing a blue dress that matched her eyes, auburn hair loose around her shoulders. You look beautiful. I blurted then. Immediately felt foolish. She couldn't see herself, but Hannah beamed. Thank you, Skylar helped me pick it out, she said. It brings out my eyes. Your cousin has good taste. Her apartment smelled amazing garlic, basil, tomatoes. Simmering, she navigated her kitchen with practiced ease, everything organized precisely where she could find it. Can I help? I offered, just keep me company, tell me about your day. So I did, describing a particularly stubborn dachshund and his even more stubborn owner. Hannah laughed at all the right places, asking questions that showed she was really listening. It struck me how rare that was to be truly heard over dinner. She reached for my hand across the table. I like you, Isla, more than I probably should, considering you're fresh out of a marriage with a man. I like you too, I admitted, and yes, this is all new territory for me, but it feels right. But I'm scared. I've only ever been with Brian. What if I'm just rebounding? What if I mess this up? Hannah's fingers traced patterns on the back of my hand. We can go as slow as you need. After dinner, we moved to the couch. Hannah put on a jazz record, the mellow saxophone filling the space between us. When she offered dessert tiramisu she'd made earlier, I accepted gratefully, needing something to do with my hands. This is amazing, I said after the first bite. You're wasted as a critic. You should be a chef. Some of us can't see what we're cooking, but you feel it like you do with everything. Hannah sat down her plate and moved closer. May I? I knew what she was asking and nodded. Yes. Her hands cubed my face, thumbs stroking my cheeks. This time, when our lips met, there was no hesitation. I felt something awakening inside me, something that had been dormant for years, maybe forever. Her kiss tasted like coffee and possibility, and I knew with sudden clarity that this was just the beginning. What exactly are we doing? I asked myself the question aloud while Pepper watched me try. On the fifth outfit of the morning, I'd never fussed this much over what to wear for a dog training session before, but this wasn't just any client. This was Hannah. We'd been seeing each other, could I call it dating, for nearly 3 weeks now. Every encounter left me more confused and exhilarated than the last. I'd catch myself daydreaming about her smile during consultations with other clients, or wondering what her hair would feel like between my fingers. This is crazy, I told Pepper, who tilted her head sympathetically. I'm 35 years old. I shouldn't be having a sexual identity crisis, but that was exactly what was happening after 15 years of exclusively dating men and 7 years married to one. I was falling for a woman. The strange part wasn't the confusion, it was how right it felt when we were together. When I arrived at Hannah's apartment that afternoon, she answered the door with that knowing smile that made my heart race. You changed your perfume? She noted immediately. Just trying something new. I'd actually spent 40 minutes at the department store, testing scents, settling on something with notes of jasmine and sandalwood. I like it, she said, leaning in slightly. Very much. The training session was productive. Rusty was responding better to Hannah's commands, but I found it hard to focus. Her hands kept brushing every correction I demonstrated required, standing close to her, breathing in that intoxicating mix of lavender shampoo and something uniquely Hannah. You seem distracted today, she said as we finished up her guide harness hanging loose in her hands too. Your voice gets higher when you're nervous. She set the harness aside. Talk to me, Ela. I sat beside her on the couch, our knees touching. I've never felt this way about a woman before. I'm trying to process what that means. Hannah's expression softened. What does it mean to you? That's just it. I don't know with. Brian, everything was mapped out. Meet, date, marry, have children, traditional life script. But with you, there's no script or hand found mine, just us figuring it out together my whole life. I've been straight, at least. I thought I was. What if this is just, I don't know, a phase rebellion against my marriage? Hannah's fingers tightened slightly around mine. Is that what you think it is? I looked at her, really looked at her. The delicate curve of her jaw, the way her blue eyes seemed to see. And to me, even though they couldn't see me, the subtle smile that always played at the corner of her lips. No, I whispered. This feels real. It feels like something was sleeping inside me that you woke up, then maybe the labels don't matter so much. She was right. Whatever this was between us, it deserved to be explored without the burden of categorization. I leaned forward and kissed her, more confident than the first time, but still learning the shape of her lips against mine. The kiss deepened her hands, threading through my hair as I pulled her closer. Something electric passed between us, a current of desire I couldn't ignore. We broke apart breathless. Stay for dinner? Hannah asked, her voice husky. I nodded before remembering. She couldn't see the gesture. Yes, definitely yes. We cooked together, moving around her kitchen. In a strange harmony, I chopped vegetables while she seasoned chicken, our bodies gravitating toward each other in the small space we were just setting. The table, when the sky opened up, rain pounded against the windows, followed by a dramatic crack of thunder that made us both jump down. I muttered, checking my phone. Flood warning. Hannah set down the plates she was carrying. You shouldn't drive in this, stay the night. The suggestion hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I don't have anything with me, I said weakly. I have spare everything. She stepped closer. No expectations, Isla. Just don't want you driving in this storm. Dinner was charged with an energy that made it hard to eat. We talked about safe topics, her book deadline, my new client roster, but underneath ran a current of anticipation after. We cleaned up. Hannah poured us each a glass of wine. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. Damn. She laughed. One sec. She moved confidently through her dark apartment. Returning moments later with candles. Being blind has its advantages. During power outages, I always know where the emergency supplies are in the candle light. Her features were soft and golden wee. Sat on the couch, the rain creating a cocoon around us. Our conversation drifted to deeper waters, her childhood, before losing her sight, my parents. Difficult marriage that had shaped my own. I always thought marriage had to be hard. I confess that's what my mother taught me. Stick it out, compromise yourself. If necessary, Hannah's hand found my face in the dim light. Love shouldn't diminish. It should make you more yourself. Her words resonated somewhere deep inside me. Without thinking, I leaned into her touch, turning to press a kiss to her palm. She inhaled sharply. What happened next was as natural as breathing. Her lips found mine in the darkness. Tentative at first, then hungry, my hands explored the curves of her body as hers mapped every inch of me. We moved to her bedroom, shedding layers of clothing and inhibition in the darkness, with rain lashing the windows and thunder punctuating our sighs. Hannah taught me a new language, one of desire and discovery, written in fingertips and lips against skin. I lost myself in her, finding pieces of myself I never knew existed later, tangled in sheets with her head resting on my chest. I felt a peace I hadn't expected. Are you okay? She whispered. More than okay, I replied, stroking her hair. I feel found. Hannah smiled against my skin. You know, for someone who's never been with a woman before, you're remarkably good at it. I laughed, the sound bubbling up from somewhere light and new. I've always been a fast learner outside the storm. Continued, but inside Hannah's apartment, inside my heart, something had cleared, revealing a path I'd never considered, but suddenly couldn't imagine not taking. I was practically floating when I arrived at my office. Monday morning, the weekend with Hannah had changed everything, not just my understanding of my sexuality, but my sense of what was possible in a relationship for the first time since my divorce. I felt hopeful. The feeling lasted exactly 43 minutes before my phone rang. Layla Garcia. I answered breezily, still riding the high of new love. Miss Garcia, this is Jerome Wilkins from Diaz Holdings Legal Department. My stomach dropped. Ryan's family business. What can I help you with, Mr. Wilkins? We're contesting the valuation of your dog training business and the divorce settlement. Our forensic accountant believes you've underreported your income substantially. That's ridiculous, I spluttered. Everything was disclosed fairly. Nevertheless, Mr. Diaz feels the division was inequitable. We'll be filing a motion to reopen the financial discovery process. After he hung up, I sat staring at the wall, all the lightness I'd been carrying disappeared. Brian wouldn't rest until he'd squeezed every drop from our marriage, especially now that my business was finally growing. His family had always seen me as a gold digger, despite the fact that I'd supported us while Brian finished his MBA. I canceled my afternoon appointments and drove straight to Hannah's apartment where she was working on her manuscript. They're coming after my business, I explained, pacing her living room while Rusty watched with concerned eyes. Brian knows it's all. He's doing this out of spite. Hannah set her laptop aside. Come here. She patted the couch beside her, and when I sat, she pulled me close. His family has money and connections. What do you have that can make them back off? Nothing. That's the problem. She was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns on my arm. What if you had something they valued more than money, like what their reputation, their image? She sat up straighter. Brian's family is old New York money. Right, very traditional, I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see the gesture. Yes, his father's practically fossilized when it comes to social norms. What if you were off the market in a way that would make pursuing you look bad? I frowned. I don't follow. What if you were engaged to me? I stared at her, mouth open. You can't be serious. Think about it. The Diaz family is all about appearances. If Brian keeps harassing his ex-wife, who's now engaged to a woman, a blind woman, at that, it looks petty and discriminatory. That's actually brilliant and terrible. I stood up, resuming my pacing. I can't ask you to pretend to be engaged to me. Hannah laughed. Why not? We're already dating. It's just accelerating the timeline a bit, but it's dishonest, more dishonest than Brian trying to bankrupt you out of spite. She had a point. I sat back down, taking her hands in mine. You really think this would work? Rich families like the Dazes care about one thing above all else, their social standing. Brian would rather back off than have his family look prejudiced against a disabled lesbian couple. I couldn't help laughing at her bluntness. When you put it that way, Rook, it doesn't have to be forever, just until the divorce dust settles. She squeezed my hands. Besides, I get to tell people I'm engaged to the sexy dog trainer who makes amazing bourbon cake. Win-win. Despite my reservations, I found myself agreeing the plan made tactical sense, and if I was honest with myself, the idea of being engaged to Hannah wasn't exactly unpleasant. The next day, we went ring shopping. Nothing extravagant, a simple silver band with a small sapphire that matched Hannah's eyes. We took the selfie together, her hand prominently displaying the ring, my arm around her waist, both of us smiling broadly. I posted it on every social platform with the caption, "She said yes." #engaged, #loveicelove. Within hours, my phone was blowing up with confused congratulations. My friends knew I'd just gotten divorced, and as far as they knew, I'd never dated women. I crafted a narrative. Hannah and I had been friends. First feelings developed over time, and after my marriage ended, we realized what we felt was more than friendship. Most people accepted this with surprising ease. Except, of course, Brian's sister, who called that evening. What kind of stunt are you pulling, Isla Clarissa? You're engaged to a woman after 15 years of being completely straight. Love surprises us sometimes, I replied calmly, reading from the script. Hannah and I had prepared. Hannah makes me happier than I've been in years. Brian thinks this is just to mess with the settlement. Brian is welcome to think whatever he wants, but I suggest he drops the motion to reopen financial discovery. It would look pretty bad for the Diaz family to be harassing a newly engaged queer couple, don't you think? Especially when one of us has a disability. The silence on the other end told me Hannah's strategy had hit its mark. I'll talk to my brother, Clarissa finally said, then hung up. Later that night, Hannah and I celebrated with champagne we clinketed. Glasses on her balcony, the city lights twinkling around us to successful deception. She toasted with a grin to my fake fiancé. I returned, leaning in to kiss her. The kiss deepened, and as Hannah's hands found their way under my shirt, I had a fleeting thought that maybe this engagement wasn't as fake as we were pretending. The way my heart raced when she touched me, the comfort I felt in her presence, those things were undeniably real. What are you thinking? Hannah asked, pulling back slightly. That I'm lucky. I answered honestly, fake engagement aside, I'm lucky to have found you. Her smile in response was radiant, a promise of something I was just beginning to understand, that sometimes the most authentic connections begin with the most unexpected circumstances. I never thought I'd find myself back at Leonard, the five-star restaurant where Brian had proposed years ago, yet here I was adjusting my black cocktail dress while Hannah, stunning in deep blue, sat beside me. The Diaz family's annual business dinner, an event I dreaded as Brian's wife, now felt like walking into the lion's den. You look beautiful, Hannah whispered, somehow sensing my nervousness. How do you always know what I'm feeling? I asked, taking her hand. Your breathing changes, she smiled. Plus, you keep fidgeting with your ring. The sapphire engagement ring caught the light as I twisted it for something meant to be a prop. In our charade, I'd grown surprisingly attached to it. When Brian spotted us across the restaurant, his expression darkened. He was flanked by his parents, Martin and Milana Diaz, pillars of old money Manhattan, who had never quite approved of me. Steady, Hannah murmured, squeezing my hand as they approached. Lila, Brian acknowledged stiffly. I didn't expect to see you here. I received the usual invitation. I replied. The Diaz Holdings dinner included all executives and their spouses as status. I technically held when the invitations went out, and you must be the fiancé, Eleanor said, eyeing Hannah with thinly veiled suspicion. Hannah Ellen. Hannah extended her hand in Eleanor's general direction, forcing the older woman to take it. Food critic for the Times. I've reviewed this restaurant 3 times. Eleanor's eyebrows shot up. Hannah's reputation preceded her. Her scathing reviews could make or break establishments. Please join us, Martin offered with strained politeness. The last thing the Diaz family wanted was a scene in front of their business associates throughout the appetizer course. I felt like I was acting in a play. Hannah, however, was magnificent, charming, witty. Completely at ease, she navigated the table, setting flawlessly told, engaging stories about her work and expertly fielded uncomfortable questions. So how long have you two known each other? Brian's mother asked pointedly. About 3 months, Hannah replied smoothly, but when it's right, it's right. Isn't that what they say, 3 months after a 7-year marriage seems hasty? Elena remarked. Hannah's smile never wavered. Some people know their hearts immediately, others spend years with the wrong person before figuring it out. I nearly choked on my wine across the table. Brian's jaw tightened. And what about children? Eleanor pressed. Surely you want a family, Isla? You always talked about having children. Before I could respond, Hannah placed her hand over mine. We're exploring our options. Families come in all forms these days, don't they? Her confident performance was so convincing. I almost believed our engagement was real. The way she anticipated questions, the natural way she touched me, it felt genuine. When her hand rested casually on my thigh under the table, I wasn't acting. When my breath caught by the time dessert arrived, even Brian seemed uncertain whether our relationship was a sham. I caught him watching us with a strange expression, hurt mixed with confusion, as Hannah fed me a bite of chocolate mousse, her fingers lingering near my lips, subtle. I whispered when his parents were distracted too much. She whispered back, grinning perfect. I assured her, surprised by how much I meant it. After dinner, we found ourselves alone with Brian at the bar while his parents said their goodbyes to business associates. You've made your point, Isla, he said quietly. The legal team is backing off. It wasn't about making a point, I replied. It was about protecting what's mine. His eyes flicked to Hannah, then back to me. Is she what's yours now? The possessiveness in his tone irritated. Me, that's none of your business anymore. I know you, Isla, 7 years of marriage. You're not a lesbian. Hannah stiffened beside me, but I squeezed her hand reassuringly. Maybe you never knew me at all. Brian, maybe I never knew myself until now. We left shortly. After the cool night air, a relief after hours of tension in the taxi back to Hannah's apartment. I rested my head on her shoulder, exhaustion setting in. You were amazing. I told her Oscar-worthy performance. Who says I was performing? She replied. Softly, the question hung between us as we arrived at her building. Neither of us mentioned the fact that I hadn't brought an overnight bag yet. We both assumed I was staying. It had become our pattern most nights together, a few apart when work demanded. Inside her apartment, Hannah kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. Did it work? Will they back off? Brian said. They're backing off. I slipped out of my dress, borrowing one of her oversized t-shirts to sleep in, but something felt, I don't know. Different tonight, different. How I crawled into bed beside her, our bodies finding their familiar positions when I was pretending to be engaged to you. It didn't feel like pretending. Is that crazy? Hannah was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing lazy circles on my arm. Skylar figured it out. Figured what out? That our engagement isn't real. She stopped by yesterday while you were at work, saw the ring and said, "This isn't how you imagine getting engaged." When I propped myself up on one elbow, what did you tell her? The truth, that it started as a plan to get Brian off your back? She paused, but I didn't tell her that lately. I've been wishing it wasn't just pretend. My heart stuttered. Hannah, you don't have to say anything. She rushed on. I know this is all new for you, and the last thing you need is pressure from me. I silenced her with a kiss, slow and deep and full of everything I was too afraid to say. When we finally broke apart, I rested my forehead against hers. Maybe it's not pretend anymore, I whispered. Maybe it never was coming out as in something I ever expected to do at 35, yet here I was sitting across from my best friend, Mia, at our favorite brunch spot, trying to explain how I'd gone from being Brian Diaz's wife to Hannah Allen's fiance in less than 2 months. So let me get this straight, or not straight, I guess. Mia said, stirring her mimosa. You started fake dating a woman to get your ex-husband off your back, and now you're actually in love with her. Put that way, it sounded like the plot of a romantic comedy. It's more complicated than that, is it, though? Mia raised an eyebrow. Your face lights up when you talk about her. I've known you 15 years, Isla, and I have never seen you look like this, not even with Brian. I sipped my coffee, buying time. I just don't understand how I never knew this about myself. Shouldn't I have always known I could be attracted to women? Not necessarily. Some people know from childhood, others figure it out later. Mia shrugged. Sexuality can be fluid. The important question is, are you happy? The answer came without hesitation. Yes, happier than I've been in years. Then the rest is just details. If only it were that simple. After brunch, I walked through Central Park, trying to sort through my feelings. I'd spent my entire adult life defining myself in relation to men, particularly Brian. Now I was rewriting my understanding of who I was, and it was terrifying. What if this was just a phase? What if I hurt Hannah by not being gay enough? What if my feelings changed and I broke her heart by the time I reached the dog park where I'd arranged to meet Hannah for Rusty's exercise session? My head was spinning with doubts, but the moment I saw her sitting on a bench, auburn hair, catching the sunlight, those doubts quieted. There you are, she smiled, somehow knowing it was me approaching. How was brunch with Mia? Illuminating. She thinks I'm having a sexual awakening. Hannah laughed. Is that what we're calling it? I sat beside her watching Rusty play with another dog. Hannah, what if I'm not really gay? What if this is just, I don't know, an anomaly? She turned toward me, her expression serious. Do you love me? The question caught me off guard. We hadn't used that word yet, though it had been hovering unspoken between us. Yes, I answered, surprising myself with how easily it came out. I do. Then the label doesn't matter. Gay, straight, bisexual. They're just words. What matters is what you feel. She made it sound so simple. She always did, besides, she added with a mischievous smile after what we did last night. I think we can safely rule out completely straight. I blushed, remembering Fairpoint that evening. Hannah had a work event, a restaurant opening she was reviewing. I used the alone time to visit a bookstore. Browsing the LGBTQ section was self-conscious. Fascination, a book called Late Blooming Lesbians, caught my eye, and I found myself nodding along as I flipped through its pages. Women who'd been married to men for decades before recognizing their attraction to women's stories that echoed my own. Confusion and excitement, I bought the book along with two others, feeling like I was finally finding the vocabulary for what I was experiencing. The next morning, Hannah and I met Skylar for breakfast at a cafe near the botanical gardens. I'd only met Hannah's cousin once before, and I was nervous. Skylar knew our engagement had started as a ruse. What would she think of me? "So, you're the dog trainer who turned my cousin's life upside down?" Skylar said by way of greeting. "Be nice." Hannah warned, but she was smiling. "I'm always nice." Skylar protested, then turned to me. "I'm glad she found you, even if your beginnings were unconventional over coffee and pastries." I found myself warming to Skylar. She had Hannah's quick wit and directness with none of the reservations I feared. By the time we finished breakfast, my anxiety had melted away. "I have a surprise for you two," Skylar announced as we were leaving. "I reserved the cherry blossom pavilion at the botanical gardens for tonight, private dinner. Just the two of you. Consider it an engagement gift." "Skylar, you didn't have to," Hannah began. "I know. I didn't have to. I wanted to." She hugged her cousin. "You deserve some magic." The gardens were breathtaking at sunset. Soft lights illuminated the cherry blossoms, creating a canopy of pink and gold above the small table where dinner had been laid out. A bottle of champagne, chilled in an ice bucket. Music played softly from hidden speakers. "I wish you could see this," I told Hannah, guiding her to the table. "It's like something from a fairy tale." "Describe it to me," she requested, sitting down. So I did, painting the scene in words, the way the fading light filtered through the blossoms, the gentle sway of branches in the evening breeze, the soft glow of lanterns along the pathway. "I can see it through you," she said, reaching for my hand across the table. After dinner, we walked through the gardens, arm in arm. The spring air was cool, but not cold, filled with the scent of flowers and possibility. "I've been thinking," Hannah said, as we paused beneath a towering magnolia, "about our arrangement." My heart stuttered. "Oh, our fake engagement has served its purpose." Brian's backed off. "There's no need to keep pretending." A cold feeling spread through my chest. Was she ending things, Hannah? "Let me finish," she said gently. "I don't want a fake engagement anymore." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small box. My breath caught as she opened it, revealing a ring nearly identical to the one she already wore, a silver band with a small sapphire. "I want a real one," she continued. "I know it's fast. I know you're still figuring things out, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you." Ela Garcia, tears welled in my eyes. All my earlier doubts seemed trivial in the face of this moment, this beautiful, impossible moment. I never could have imagined. "Yes," I whispered, then louder. "Yes." Her smile was radiant as I slipped the ring onto my finger beside the first one, then pulled her into a kiss that tasted of champagne and cherry blossoms and new beginnings. Life has a way of testing happiness, right? When you found it 3 weeks into our real engagement, I was sitting in my office reviewing training schedules when my phone rang. Brian's name flashed on the screen. I almost didn't answer. Things had been quiet since the business dinner and Hannah, and I had settled into a rhythm of domestic bliss that still felt surreal, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Brian Isla." His voice was tight. "We need to talk about what I know your engagement is fake." The certainty in his tone made my stomach drop. "Clarissa saw your fiancée having drinks with her cousin last night. She overheard them talking about the arrangement you two made." I gripped the phone tighter. "You're mistaken." "Am I? Because Clarissa heard quite a lot how you cooked this whole thing up to make me back off the business valuation." How convenient it was that I'd have to look like a bigot to pursue it. My mind raced. Hannah had been out with Skylar last night, a simple cousin dinner. What could they possibly have said that? Clarissa would interpret this way, whatever Clarissa. Think she heard she's wrong. Brian's laugh was cold. Save it, Isla. I'm filing the motion tomorrow to reopen the financial discovery, and I'm submitting evidence of your fraudulent relationship as part of it. After he hung up, I sat frozen, panic rising in my chest. I needed to talk to Hannah, but she wasn't answering her phone. I tried Skylar. Next, straight to voicemail. When I finally reached Hannah 3 hours later, her voice was strangely subdued. Can you come over? She asked, Rusty sick. I rushed to her apartment, financial worries momentarily forgotten. Hannah met me at the door, her face drawn with worry. He collapsed during our walk. She explained, leading me to where Rusty lay on his bed, breathing shallowly. The vet thinks it might be bloat. They're sending in emergency transport. I knelt beside the golden retriever, checking his symptoms. His abdomen was distended, and he whimpered when I gently touched his. This is serious, I agreed. We need to get him to the animal hospital right away. The next 6 hours were a blur of veterinary consultations, tests, and anxious waiting. Hannah sat rigid in the waiting room chair, her hands clenched in her lap. I'd never seen her so vulnerable. He's all I have, she whispered when the vet took Rusty into surgery. Before you, he was my eyes, my independence. I took her hand. He's going to be okay. He's young and strong, but my reassurances felt hollow. Gastric dilatation vivalis was life-threatening, even with immediate intervention. If Rusty didn't make it, Hannah would lose not just a pet, but her mobility and security. While we waited, I told her about Brian's call. Damn. She muttered. Skylar and I were talking about the proposal at the botanical garden, how our fake engagement had become real. Clarissa must have heard just enough to get it wrong. Brian's going to reopen the case. I said he thinks he has proof. We were lying. Hannah's hand tightened around mine. Let him try. We know what's real before I could respond. The vet emerged from the surgical suite, still wearing her scrubs. Miss Allen, Rusty's stable. We managed to untwist his stomach and secure it to prevent future episodes. The next 24 hours are critical, but I'm cautiously optimistic. The relief that washed over Hannah's face was profound. She sagged against me, tears streaming down her cheeks. Can I see him? She asked briefly. The vet agreed. He's still unconscious. I guided Hannah to the recovery area, placing her hand gently on Rusty's sleeping form. She leaned down to press her forehead against his whispering words I couldn't hear. We spent the night at the animal hospital, taking turns dozing in uncomfortable waiting room chairs. By morning, Rusty was awake and responding well, though he'd need weeks of recovery. You should go home and rest, I told Hannah around noon. I'll stay with him. She shook her head stubbornly. I'm not leaving him. You've been awake for over 24 hours. You need sleep, so do you. We compromised, taking shifts. When Hannah finally agreed to let me drive her home for a shower and nap, she paused at her apartment door. Thank you, she said softly, for being here, for understanding what he means to me. You don't have to thank me. That's what partners do. Her tired smile made my heart ache. I love you, Layla Garcia. I love you too. Now get some rest. I'll be back in 3 hours. While Hannah slept, I made some calls, first to my lawyer, explaining Brian's new threat, then to the kennel, where I boarded Pepper, extending her stay another day, finally to Skylar, who was horrified to learn about Clarissa's eavesdropping. This is my fault, she groaned. I was asking Hannah about the rings, why she has 2 nearly identical ones. She was explaining how your relationship evolved. It's not your fault, I assured her. Brian's grasping at straws. When I returned to the animal hospital, Rusty was sitting up, his tail wagging weakly. When he saw me, the vet was encouraged by his progress, but cautioned that his training might be affected. Guide dogs require perfect health and focus, she explained. He'll physically recover, but he might not be able to return to service work. The implications hit me hard without Rusty Hannah would lose a crucial piece of her independence. The thought of her navigating Manhattan with just a white cane seemed impossibly dangerous. I was still mulling this over when Brian called again. "I'm willing to make a deal," he said without preamble. "Drop the engagement charade, admit it was a fraud, and I'll back off the business valuation." My hand tightened around the phone. "Not going to happen. Think about it, Isla. Is this little experiment of yours worth losing?" "Everything you've built." I looked through the window at Rusty at the empty chair where Hannah would soon return at the matching rings on my finger. "It's not an experiment, Brian. It's my life, my real life, and I'm not going to let you threaten it." Anymore, the annual Brooklyn K-9 charity show couldn't have come at a worse time. 2 weeks after Rusty's surgery, with Brian's legal threats looming and my business hanging in the balance, the last thing I wanted was to be in the spotlight, but I'd committed months ago to judge the event, and backing out now would damage my professional reputation. "You don't have to come," I told Hannah as I dressed that morning. "Rusty still needs rest." She was sitting on the edge of our bed. Yes, our bed, since we had officially moved in together after Rusty's health scare. It seemed silly to maintain 2 apartments when we spent every night together. "Anyway, I'm coming," she said firmly, adjusting the collar of her blouse. "Rusty's well enough for a short outing. Besides, I'm not letting you face Brian alone." We'd learned from Skylar that Brian was sponsoring one of the event categories, a transparent attempt to corner me in public. His family foundation had made a last-minute donation large enough to guarantee his presence at the judges' table. It might get ugly. I warned Hannah, smiled, reaching for my hand. "I can handle ugly. I'm a New York food critic, remember?" The venue was packed when we arrived. Dogs of every breed and size paraded around with their owners, from tiny Chihuahua and sequin vests to stately Great Danes and bow ties under normal circumstances. I would have loved every minute. Layla Garcia. A volunteer approached with a clipboard. "You're needed at the judges' table in 10 minutes. I squeezed Hannah's hand. "Will you be okay on your own? Go." She encouraged Skylar's meeting me by the refreshment tent. "We'll be fine." I made my way to the judges' area, steeling myself for the confrontation. Sure enough, Brian was already seated, looking smugly comfortable in his tailored suit. "Lila," he acknowledged coolly. "Didn't expect to see you here with everything going on. Some of us honor our commitments," I replied, taking my seat at the opposite end of the table. The competition began, and I forced myself to focus on the dogs evaluating conformation, temperament, and training with professional detachment. But as the final category approached, I noticed a commotion near the entrance. Hannah was making her way toward the judges' table, Rusty moving slowly beside her, not in his guide harness, but wearing a bright vest that read "therapy dog in training." Ryan noticed them too. "What's she doing?" Before I could answer, the event coordinator approached the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special presentation before our final category. Miss Hannah Ellen, renowned food critic and advocate for service animal awareness, would like to say a few words." The audience applauded as Hannah took the stage, Rusty settling carefully at her feet. I hadn't known about this. It wasn't part of the program. "Thank you, Hannah," began her voice, clear and confident. "Many of you know me from my restaurant reviews, but today I'm here to talk about something more personal. 2 weeks ago, my guide dog Rusty suffered a life-threatening medical emergency." The crowd murmured sympathetically. What you may not know is that guide dogs who can no longer perform their duties are often retired from service. This would have left me without the mobility assistance I've relied on for years. She paused, but thanks to the incredible work of dog trainer Layla Garcia, Rusty is being retrained as a therapy dog, and I'm training with a new guide dog on cue. Skylar emerged from the wings, leading a sleek black Labrador. "This is Midnight, Hannah," continued my new partner in navigation, "while Rusty recovers and transitions therapy work. Midnight will be my guide. None of this would have been possible without Isla, whose dedication to both dogs and humans shows what true service really means." The audience erupted in applause. I sat frozen, overwhelmed by Hannah's public acknowledgement. Brian shifted uncomfortably beside me. As the applause died down, Hannah wasn't finished on a personal note. I'd also like to announce that Layla and I will be getting married this fall. Love finds us in unexpected places, sometimes through the most difficult challenges. Thank you. Another round of applause. Even more enthusiastic, several people turned to look at me, smiling. Brian's face had gone rigid when the event concluded. I found Hannah waiting near the exit, both dogs at her side. You planned this? I said, still processing what had happened. Skylar helped, she admitted. Was it too much? I kissed her, not caring who saw it was perfect, but what was that about midnight? When did this happen? I've been working with her for a week, wanted a surprise. You, she smiled. The training center had an opening in their program after another applicant dropped out. They fast-tracked me because of my situation. Brian approached before I could respond. His expression was unreadable. Quite a show. He said flatly. I stepped protectively closer to Hannah. It wasn't a show, save it. He glanced around at the people watching us curiously. There's no way to prove your engagement was originally fake without looking like the villain in your little love story. That's because there is no villain. Hannah interjected, just people finding their way. Brian studied her for a long moment, then looked at me. I've instructed the lawyers to withdraw the motion. The original settlement. Stan's relief washed over me. Thank you, I'm not doing it for you. He clarified, the publicity would be bad for the family business. As he walked away, Hannah reached for my hand. Is it over? Yes, I said, realizing it was true in more ways than one. It's finally over. 6 months later, we stood in the same bakery where we'd first met, surrounded by friends. 2 well-behaved dogs and a 3-tiered bourbon chocolate cake. No formal ceremony. Just vows exchanged with simple honesty. As I placed a gold band next to Hannah's engagement ring, I marveled at the journey that had brought us here. Who knew? Hannah whispered as we shared our first kiss as a married couple, that bumping into you would change everything. I did. I replied, holding her close. The moment you tasted my cake. She laughed against my lips, and I knew with absolute certainty that some endings are really just better beginnings.